Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra spoiler review. This will be my last review for the final champion. I'm not gonna go over the handful of last few cards that have been dropped yesterday evening to round out the set, probably. But I'll be talking about all the dragon spoilers and Aurelion Sol in this video. Maybe I'll do a video on the last few cards, but I think it's not necessary. We'll explore them later today when they drop live on stream and build some stuff. I'm probably going to be live a bit before the patch drops to talk and brew some ideas, and then once the patch drops we can start right away playing some of those ideas. I already posted 2 ideas on my social media. If you haven't seen them, check them out. But yeah. Before we dive into this review, please subscribe down below if you haven't yet. There are a lot of you guys watching that haven't subscribed yet. Only takes a few seconds, doesn't cost you anything, and really helps the channel out, so I would appreciate it. And now, without further ado, let's talk about the cards. First off, we have the Dragon Badge that they dropped right before Aurelion Sol with the new mechanic Fury. Fury, pretty straightforward. When the unit kills another unit, granted +1/+1. So it has some additional benefits with cards like single combat, which is nice, but it primarily is a combat ability to just sort of virtually makes the units a bit bigger. Like for example, the 4-drop 4/4 with Fury is comparable to like a 4/4 4/5 with upside. Because unless you're fighting a 4 attack unit, where it's obviously worse, versus any other unit, it's sort of a 4/5 or better, because after combat it gets the 5th point of health. I say 4/5 instead of 5/5 because during combat it doesn't have the sort of 5 attack, but after the combat it virtually turns into a 5/5 and then can even grow further, potentially with some help. This obviously also synergizes particularly well with stuff like Barrier, because those are other ways to make them grow. Or Tough, for example. There are a couple of solid synergies. So it's just something that adds stats to units, so it can be evaluated similar to more stats. So the White Flame Protector is more than a 4-cost 4/4, since it virtually is going to grow. Although it initially is a bit weaker than a 4/5, it long term is better than, say, an Airlock. Herald of Dragons is kind of a nice card in a way. The problem is being a 1/1 for 2 is problematic. There's a lot that punishes it. Talked about this a lot before. 1 health units are very iffy, and this one is very unreliable for that reason. At least it doesn't matter in combat, because you don't want to get in combat with this anyway, but it is particularly fragile against, say, PNZ, Shadow Isles. Shadow Isles in particular is a pretty big deal, and Bilgewater. Like Bilgewater and Shadow Isles are the 2 big ones, and PNZ is secondary with like Static Shock. But yeah, it's still an interesting card, and dropping like a White Flame Protector on 3 is pretty good, and a 5-drop Dragons on 4, and it accelerates into Aurelion Sol, as we'll see later, so it might turn out good enough to see some play, at least down the line, maybe when we get Shyvana and more dragons. Right now, maybe the fragility doesn't make up, the power doesn't make up for the fragility, and it might not have enough impact, I'm not sure, but it's a card worth trying, but my hopes aren't too high on that one. Fused Firebrand, actually pretty solid, especially if the metagame is more reactive with like Ezreal decks and stuff like that. This is a pretty good card against decks like Ezreal, so and other like reactive spell heavier control decks. It's similar to like Aegis units in Eternal, for example, for people watching from Eternal, or like Hexproof, or like a weaker version of Hexproof units in Magic. It's just something that punishes people relying on interaction too much. It's just a very solid unit. Nothing standout, but like a great metagame choice in the right context. And Screeching Dragon, I think, is universally probably a bit better than Firebrand, but keep in mind, if you missing it. This is a Demacia card, not a Targon card, so you might not have the choice between the two, depending on what your deck looks like. But yeah, this is comparable to Lancer. It has some up and down sides. The fact that it's a 4/5 means that it has to attack down a bit more than Lancer, but it also survives more. And it scales really well with the Fury. So after the first hit, it's already like a 5/6 effectively, which is pretty strong. So this is going to be a real contender to compete with Swiftwing Lancer, and I'm not entirely sure which one I like better without having played with it. It's a very solid card. And Dragon's Clutch, it draws 2 different dragons for 3 mana burst, or grants dragon allies +1/+1. I guess since it doesn't say everywhere, unless they change that wording and change their wording conventions, this would only buff dragons in play, which is not that great given that we only have like 3, 4, 5 dragons right now, and they're already pretty big, so they don't even care that much about buffing, so the buffing effect is pretty marginal. But drawing 2 different dragons makes this an interesting tutor and draw 2. Like say if you play a deck with, say, Fused Firebrand and Aurelion Sol, then you only have 2 dragons, so if you use this, you will always draw a Firebrand and an Aurelion Sol, for example. So this is a pretty interesting like tutor style effect for Aurelion Sol decks, where you play Aurelion Sol and 1 other dragon, maybe play like 2 Aurelion Sols and like 3 of the other dragon, and then you Dragon's Clutch for Aurelion Sol to not get your hand clogged up too much. And also it allows to make your Behold better, like you can Behold on 2 and then Dragon's Clutch, stuff like that. Seems like a very solid card. All in all, this Dragon's Badge doesn't seem super impressive, but very solid and worth tinkering around with for like mid-rangey decks or Aurelion Sol type deck. Which brings us to Aurelion Sol and friends. So first off, Aurelion Sol, every Timmy's dream, the big bad impressive bomb. He's a dragon, he's a 10 cost 10/10, so big numbers. One of the like favorite unit types. He has Fury, which is kind of whatever. It just kind of means he's really hard to wear down in combat, but that doesn't really matter too much. He has Spell Shield though, that's a really big deal for a big unit like this. The problem otherwise would be just getting it Vengeance and stuff very easily. Would be a big issue here, but Spell Shield actually makes it much more reliable to get at least to the next turn to get the first Celestial payoff at the very least, in addition to the Invoke, so you get like 2 Celestial cards out of it before the opponent kills him a lot of the time. A level up is kind of whatever. At round end, your allies have 20 plus total power, and then yeah, he just becomes an 11/11, and the random Celestial card he generates costs 0, but by the time that happens, it doesn't even matter that much that the card costs 0, because you might not have a lot of resources left and you have full mana, so the effect's actually kind of marginal. So Aurelion Sol leveled up is more like a small bonus than actually relevant. Like, but I think it's probably reasonable that they made him this way, because you already work hard to get to 10 and get him out. So also having to work in addition to level him up would be weird. I mean, I guess they could have gone with a level up condition that makes it likely that he often is leveled up by the time you play him. That would have been one way. But I guess this way it's just kind of like a flashy bonus that happens later, while the card mostly is the same between both versions. Also keep in mind, he invokes Celestials that cost 7 or more, and as I learned yesterday, there is a ratio discrepancy between units and spells. As far as I heard, somewhere on Twitter they said something about units being 5 times more likely to show up than spells, so you're like really likely to get the big bad Celestial finishers from Aurelion Sol and maybe one of the big spells. yeah, he's a cool card. Not sure how competitive his deck is going to be, but the obvious things that come to mind are just like Freljord Targon ramp with the Trundle Behold and the Targon Behold stuff, and ramping dragon synergies and stuff like that. And the other one is just more like Thresh Aurelion Sol, trying to cheat Aurelion Sol out with Thresh that way. Those are going to be the two things that I'll probably try and put together. And I guess the third one in a way is just Dragon Targon, like in Allegiance Targon with like a Light Splash, maybe for Thresh, maybe for something else. I'm not sure. Maybe for the Demacia Dragon because it's a dragon and it gives you board control. So those are some of the things that I can think of right now. But yeah, I'm not sure if an Aurelion Sol deck will turn out to be competitive, but it will probably at least be pretty cool, and the card looks really cool, the animations look really cool in the video, so check that out if you haven't yet. Then we have another dragon. It's an 8-cost 8/8 with Fury. On play, you pick 2 enemies, and at round start, you stun them. So card is actually pretty bad, I think. It's like a really weird delayed Yone. Sure, it has +2/+2 more, and it has Fury, and it stuns the units permanently, but it also doesn't stun them right away. The opponent can just use them for other stuff, and then it's just an 8 for 8. It also is a mana more expensive. I think this is a really bad Yone, basically, and Yone is already like kind of situational and much, much better than this. So yeah, I think this card is really bad. In Violus Vox, on the other hand, actually seems pretty solid. It's a 6-cost 5/6. It's a bit small for a 6-drop, but in the end with Fury it scales pretty decently. And to be fair, as a 5-drop without the Fury, it would already be like a 5-cost 5/6 would be kind of above the curve. So paying 1 mana more for the Fury and for like the pretty powerful effect seems reasonable. When an ally with Fury kills an enemy for the first time each round, create a random dragon in hand. That also, by the way, is another card that seems particularly appealing with Concerted Strike and single combat to draw cards and stuff like that. Building on a foundation for the future of like Targon, Demacia Dragons, maybe in the next batch, maybe in the last batch of Call of the Mountain. But even until then, I think it's going to be fine. The opponent is going to have a hard time attacking into this. So it's pretty nice on defense. Even on offense, it's bigger than most units, so the opponent has to either take 5 or block, and you get a random dragon. Also, like I said, maybe there's even like a Targon Demacia deck already with some dragons. Maybe you end up splashing, like play Targon Allegiance with like maybe the Demacia Dragon and single combat, or just single combat and Concerted Strike, and not the Demacia Dragon because we have the Targon 5-cost Dragon. Stuff like that. There are a couple of like interesting options here. Maybe you play both 5-drop dragons. Yeah, it's a very solid card. Star Shaping, not very good, unfortunately, I think. It is noteworthy that getting a like Celestia card that costs 7 or more is pretty nice, because I also learned that apparently the more expensive Celestia cards are rarer than the cheaper ones, so there is a rarity to them. The more expensive and high impact they are, the rarer they are, so they show up less often, which is nice because that limits some of my concern about the balancing power level that I talked about, that some of these cards are too good to be real cards. And the fact that they are token cards means they still show up and still are that powerful, just less often. But that balances them even more. It makes them like the more rare power play that you get, rather than the average one in like 22, 23 or whatever of the Celestia cards. But yeah, 5 to not impact the board and heal 5 to invoke seems a bit hefty. This seems like a worse version of Catalyst, and Catalyst isn't that great, because Catalyst at least kind of makes up for some of the durdling lost tempo by ramping, while this doesn't impact the board or like your tempo at all. I guess you could argue that some of the cards you get might make up for it, but yeah, I'm highly skeptical. I think the card is unlikely to see much play, if any. Then we have Disguise Descend. This is a pretty cool champion spell, actually. Like, you can go Aurelion Sol, and the next turn make Disguise Descend to sort of lock up the game. That is a powerful possibility. The other one is basically just going heavy on the dragons and then having this cost maybe like 9, and being sort of a one-sided ruination, which is really powerful. Especially with more dragons coming and Shyvana, this seems like a pretty interesting card right now. It's more niche, and I think it's probably not gonna be good enough to put in your deck outside of like the champion card, but maybe there's a way to try it with like 6 dragons plus some Aurelion Sols, like with the Demacia dragon stuff that I mentioned, but it'll probably be a bit too clunky and situational. And last we have Messenger's Sigil. Yeah, what can I say? This is counterfeit copies all over again. This card's really bad. Don't play it, it's a massive trap. You invest the mana, you discard a card to shuffle stuff in your deck that you even need to play to recycle. Like, sure, you get a free 2/2, but the free 2/2 still costs you 2 mana to get to the card underneath it. And yeah, this is a bit better than Mushroom Cloud, but Mushroom Cloud is horrible, and it's about as bad or worse than counterfeit copies, because counterfeit copies actually enable some combo stuff, while this is supposed to be a value card that costs you value. So yeah, Messenger Sigil is horribly unplayable. Don't put this card into any decks, please. And yeah, that rounds out the Aurelion Sol Dragon review. Let me know what you guys think. What do you want to brew? What are you looking forward to? What are your ideas with Aurelion Sol and the dragons? Yeah, I'm stoked for later. Hope to see all of you guys on my stream in the evening to jam some of the awesome new cards and try some of the deck ideas that I have and talk about the new set and enjoy it together. So yeah, that's again for this time. You know the drill. If you enjoy it, hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe for more, turn on notification icon to not miss out on future content. Share it with your friends. Check the description for all further information. And yeah, I'm your host ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Or rather on my stream with the new set in a couple hours.